I'm going to use this background to try and
that looks very
try and match yours. Yeah, not that it's a competition or anything, but but anyway. So there we have it. So we've this is our second podcast recording, which is I'm really pleased that we've managed to come this far. But at the end of the day, this is we wanted this podcast to be about meditation, right? And a mutual sort of discussion about our progress in meditation and fundamentally all about what we've done. Obviously, we had a chat offline the other day where I sort of talked about the fact that the feedback from our first podcast was really good. I've since formed a board of advisors, as any sort of not-for-profit podcast does, and the board of advisors consist of a couple of people with a lot of very senior people with a lot of experience in Buddhism. You could even call one of them or two of them like bhikkhus, a bhikkhuni and a bhikkhu. So they've got a lot of experience, and that's really great. So one of the feedback was that a lot of the discussion centered around obviously because we ran out of time, but we wanted to discuss a lot about meditation, and that was good. But they wanted to hear more about your experience, Dave, and what your experience with meditation has been. And that's great. That's really important. And then you sent me a message saying that you wanted to hear more about what I had achieved. Because of a health scare, as you know, I've had to be forced into doing a lot of meditation and devoting large portions of my daily time towards meditation. And so that's been, I'll tell you a bit more about that later if we've got time. But let's start off with your experience of meditation and your personal journey with meditation, Dave.
Well, yeah. Welcome. Thank you for having me on
No
the
problem. Thank you. Yeah.
It's nice to be able to broadcast from a sunset to the beach. It's good.
Oh, likewise. Yeah. So that's the theme of our meetings now, isn't it? We're going to try and come up with the most creative backgrounds that we can.
Or therapeutic backgrounds.
Therapeutic backgrounds. Indeed. Especially in Sydney right now, because we're having such weird weather. We're turning into Melbourne, aren't we?
I don't say that.
I know. So,
I think I mentioned that. Yeah, I was interested to have a couple of guests on in the future.
Yeah, me too.
There's a client that's interested to come on and share his experience, and then like you, I do have from my past, I guess you could call a monk or retired monk that very steeped in the practice. And I think there's a lot that I remember from staying in the monastery, but he's living it more so now than I am. And so I think it'd be good to get some insights from him.
Fantastic.
Yeah. Fantastic.
I've got someone that's keen to jump on as well, and she owns a business, a not-for-profit business called Arogya, ROGYA, and I'll put the link down in the comments. Promoting the Eightfold Path in our daily lives, but also in corporate Australia. And I think that's pretty ambitious, but very, very admirable. And it'd be great to have her on to talk us through her aims and missions, I guess, and the Eightfold Path. How wonderful!
Yeah. And I'm interested to know do you know what Arogya means? I imagine it's a Pali word, but
I actually don't. Funny, should have been one of my first questions.
Have a look.
But I need to look it up. Yeah. But the first thing that comes up on Google, I think, is her business. Try and go from there.
Overall well-being.
There we go. There we go. Yeah. How forgetful.
Health of mind, body, and spirit. I mean, that sounds pretty good.
It's awesome. Yeah. I mean, when she talks about it, she gets very passionate, and it's really inspiring.
It sounds more of a Sanskrit yoga word than Buddhist. Because
Agree.
From my experience of practicing Buddhism, there was not a lot of consideration given to overall well-being in general.
Right.
It's like, it was more like, you know, if you've got pain, then learn how to deal with it. And, you know, you shouldn't be having special dietary requirements. You shouldn't, you know, need yoga in your practice. This is not part of the Buddhist practice. And it's funny, there's a word called akimbo. So one of the rules for the monks is that their legs should never be akimbo. And I always thought that was funny.
Wow.
But it's
and what does that mean, Dave?
Akimbo, the way I understand it is, it's like, so if you're a monk, and especially if you're in public, you should always be very well mannered the way you walk, and, you know, not dance in public. And yoga is putting your legs akimbo. So it's kind of frowned upon to do yoga in public.
Right.
I can remember I wanted to run some yoga classes while I was in the monastery, and not really allowed to do it publicly. It had to be a bit of a hush thing between the monks. We kind of went to a secret cave and did some yoga out of the way, and and there was one other monk actually, and he was very into like Tai Chi, Qigong. So that again is akimbo, legs akimbo. So I think his name was Kimbo, by the way, but I can't remember. But
what a coincidence!
It's a Pali word for, you know, being proper in public, not drawing attention to yourself. Not
modesty, I guess.
Yeah.
Comes to mind.
Yeah,
that's great.
So yeah, and when it comes to living in the monastery, compared to my experience of Buddhism from the past, I was quite surprised at how free they were, even though they had these, you know, strict rules about not lifting your leg in public or walking over to a fire hydrant. You weren't allowed to do that. But
walking over to a fire hydrant?
Yeah, like a dog, to lift your leg.
I see. Sorry, I lost the context of that. Okay. Very interesting.
But yeah, so there was a lot of freedom around food, which I was surprised. I thought, you know, monks not allowed to harm any animal, not allowed to touch a plant even, and yet they just eat whatever they're given. That could be meat, that could be fish, that could be.
That's right.
You don't have the preferences so much.
Well, that's right. Is it that? And that's directly from the sutras, isn't it? Where Buddha himself is quoted as saying, "Eat what is given," because the whole point is you've got the five Ks, right? The 5 aggregates, and the point being that with the 5 aggregates, you're not supposed to relish taste, you know, isn't it? So, formations, feelings, cognition, and then finally thought. So you're not supposed to go beyond this the point of cognition, and then the overall all 5 of them make up consciousness. So effectively, if you eat what is given, then you shouldn't really relish the taste. You shouldn't really go beyond cognition, right? I'm sure they did. Yeah, I'm sure they did.
They had a lot of lovely food, especially on the celebration days.
Yeah. I remember Ajahn Brahm is quoted as having said that in one of his monastic experiences, he thought that he had achieved a point of awakening, and it's one of his classic funny stories. And he was walking around feeling really good about himself, and then in the evening he was about to receive dana, and one of the senior monks had mixed. He was really looking forward to it because he could see that they had pork stew, which was his favorite, and the senior monk mixed the pork stew with the vegetable stew or some other stew, and but the senior monk served himself pork stew, and then when it came to Ajahn Brahm's turn, it was all mixed up, and Ajahn Brahm was really upset about it, and then he realized, oh, an awakened one wouldn't be upset about this. And then he realized. It's one of the classic stories.
I think, from my time living in the monastery, I would say that food time is one of the most awaited times of the day.
Wow.
For most people, it's kind of, and you've got the monks and they're, got to get up there at the right time. So you see them waiting in the bushes, waiting for their food. It's quite funny. But
so when you say awakened, as in very sort of heightened level of alertness type of awakened, you mean? Or
no, I probably said awaited.
Awaited. Right.
Highly anticipated time of the day. Yeah.
Yeah. Wow.
It was you're only eating once a day, and you get pretty hungry by the next morning.
That's incredible. It's incredible. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
It was the same in the yoga temple. The food was a very exciting time of the day.
Yes.
The first.
And can you tell us, Dave, why it's supposed to be one meal a day? What's the intention with that?
Good question. I mean, it's important to look at what time of day they eat, I think, as well, because in the monastery where I was, you couldn't have the lunch after midday, so it had to be had before midday. So then, and they are allowed to have snacks in the evening,
right?
But it varies from monastery to monastery what that snack includes. It's usually very simple.
Interesting.
But yeah.
When you say simple, you mean like sort of fruit or biscuits or?
So in I think it's the Pali text, they have foods which are considered medicine. And funnily enough, chocolate is one of them. Dark chocolate, considered a medicine, and ginger. So that people are allowed to have like ginger strips, like Buddhism, ginger beer. You're allowed to have ginger beer.
Ginger beer.
No milk, no meat. You could have, for some reason, sunflower seeds are allowed as well. There are a few other things. But yeah.
Wow, that's very interesting. That's
a few things. I think cheese even. That doesn't make any sense. Anyway.
That's interesting. Yeah.
You can have as much as you want coffee and tea.
Really? Wow.
Yeah. Yeah.
Interesting.
Yeah, so they used to get very fine coffee. Coffee brought up from.
They didn't skimp out on coffee, eh? Yeah.
No, it was very kind of decadent when it came to food, both in the yoga and in the Buddhism. But of course, as a monk, I wasn't allowed to cook or handle the food. But it was interesting. I always kind of battled with that because I personally thought, and back to your question, with the one meal a day, monks have their bowl, the alms bowl. I don't know, so they're allowed to fill the alms bowl up once, and that's for the meal, for the main meal. And so in Australia, the main meal is like 11 o'clock because we'd often do a bit of work before then. And in which case, if you're doing work, you're allowed to have a bit of breakfast, a bit of energy. But when we stayed in the Thai monasteries with some of the senior ajahns, respected ajahns, they quite strict around food, and they actually have their lunch at like 7 a.m. in the morning. And so the rest of the day, that's one meal. They go on the Pindabat, which is the arms around through the town,
Right.
like 5 a.m., come back 7 a.m., pack up lunch, and then, you've got the whole day where you may be able to, I don't know, pocket a few things from the lunch that you could drink back at your home, like a few drinks or something. But aside from that, there's a afternoon sweets kind of session, drinks and what is it, ginger, things like that. But
Wow.
yeah, as for why it's only one, for me, I think it helps with focus. And if you got an empty stomach, but that's my own belief.
Well, it certainly aligns with my experience. If I have a full stomach, I tend to struggle with focus. I tend to
Yeah,
more sleepy.
yeah. And what used to happen for me is because we'd go to bed at a relatively early time, 9 or 10, wake up at 4 or 5, and you get up, meditate in the morning. You have quite a big lunch with this arms bowl, which was like the size of half a bowling ball.
Yeah.
And then after that, yeah, you're in digestion mode, and quite often I'd sit down to meditate and find myself on the floor asleep. So it was usually a resting time.
Yeah. Well, that's reassuring because sounds like it's a fairly common experience then, that sort of sleepiness after a meal, and I certainly struggle.
Yeah, I think the other thing with the one meal is that the meal is quite a big spectacle, can be. So if you're having more than one meal, because there's the whole ceremony with the monks and them collecting the food and then receiving the food,
Yeah.
and eating and doing some blessings and all that, chat with the abbot, that kind of thing. It's quite a big spectacle in the monastery. And so if you're going to do it more than once a day, I think it's also about allowing time where you can practice, and you don't have to be in the community. You can have that time to yourself. You just
Nice.
come for the food, that's it. Receive, eat what you get, and go away and go back to your hut and practice. So
Fabulous. Fabulous.
that was probably a big reason why it was only one meal.
Yeah. I see. By the way, so it's all about sort of creating the right conditions. I think we talked about this in the last episode, isn't it? The right conditions for meditation to occur, or samadhi to take place, or whatever. It's interesting, isn't it?
And that was a big reason that I migrated from the yoga to the Buddhism, because I wanted that time to myself. And in the yoga temple, it was the opposite. It was like, don't ever be alone.
Wow.
Always someone around you. Yeah.
That's interesting, isn't it? What is that? Don't ever be alone. That sounds pretty.
They have like because we're training brahmacharis, which is like celibates. They had this big thing about protecting the young males from females and lust and things. So it's like, don't get stuck in your own thoughts and always be around someone. And, yeah, good company.
Wow. Oh, I see. Okay, so sort of protective company, protected from your own thoughts, sort of thing.
Yeah, which I didn't like that, because the Buddhism was kind of the opposite, but still not exactly what I was expecting. It was still a lot more communal than I was kind of looking for. But I could see why they did that way. Of course.
Well, I mean, the journey of enlightenment is said to be a solitary one, isn't it? Was it that there's a sutta about the rhinoceros and solitude? I forget the gist of it, but the primary focus of Buddhist meditation is to aim towards solitude, isn't it? Because his solitude is where you really start to, introspect, start to focus inwards on your thoughts, examine them, understand their arising and passing, and so on and so forth.
Mm.
But you found it a lot less solitary than you were expecting.
Yeah. Well, like, what a rains retreat is, which is kind of a dedicated practice time. The monastery shuts down and less work is done. So I look forward to that. But some of the monks were given like 2 weeks silent retreat, and I remember asking for it, but I think I only ended up getting one because I was required for work around the monastery.
Interesting.
But the other thing, I think the community is important in the monastery because it is quite a contrast from everyday life. And I did see while I was there were a couple of people who, I don't know, the solitude, I think, got to them, and it was affecting their mental health a fair bit. So not everybody was ready for that kind of seclusion. Sure. And I noticed myself when I finally did get the week to myself, which I really relished. I noticed it took 2 or 3 days before my mind started to quiet down. And then I was like, I want to protect this. And so I was like doing everything I could to avoid speaking. And even though I was on a silent retreat, I still felt like I had to uphold that. And otherwise other people would speak to me.
Yes.
Maybe they were lonely. It's like I noticed it was an adjustment to go from talking to not talking, especially when you're by yourself.
Wow. That's challenging, isn't it? It's challenging. I mean, I found, particularly in my own practice, I found it challenging to regulate one's emotions. Because you get to this point of, in my case, it took months to really get to a point of silence, or was silencing the mind, or being able to achieve a point of stillness. You're not entire stillness, but relative stillness, where one can start to observe the arising and passing of thoughts and the nature of their arising, and start to break them down into the 5 aggregates, or start to scratch away at that. But then the slightest interruption, because all I'm doing is forming a bit of a sort of my own artificial kuti at home, and the slightest interruption, I found myself getting upset and angry, because you once you achieve that samadhi, I guess, silence, you crave it, don't you? And sort of balancing craving versus attachment, it was interesting.
Well, for me, I'd see, I'd have been in the monastery for like 3 months, I'd say, and somebody new would come and they'd be like, wanting to meet everybody, wanting to talk, and I'm in this space of like not wanting to talk. And so I felt it was kind of tricky to switch the two, but I think I made it harder on myself just because I was attached to it. I definitely saw that. Yeah.
If you became attached to the solitude, you mean? Is that what you meant? This attachment?
Oh, just attached to not having to talk to people for the sake of talking to someone. People would just, it felt like people would just talk to you because they were lonely, or talk to you because they were bored. And you see that, you start to see that. It's just like, I don't want to waste my energy, which sounds terrible, but you realize that in that silence, how you're using your energy, and it could be used to focus instead of getting more distracted, I guess. So,
Right. So distracted by having to socialize, you mean, and having to talk to the newbies?
but I think about it very differently now, but it was more like stirring up my brain with words.
Right.
It's
Yes.
like
Yes.
thinking and talking are on two different levels. And
Yeah.
if you got the lake, it's like thinking is like a sailing boat, but then talking is more like a jet ski going across the lake. And it's like you see that, and it's like
Oh, wow. That's a great analogy. Yeah.
it's a bit like what's that heart thing? Right, measures your heart, goes across
ECG.
that line. Yeah, and it's like, you know, the more energy you put into it, the bigger the the kind of I don't know, measurement or whatever. But it stirs it up. But that was just my belief. I don't know if it was true, but I realized it wasn't sustainable because there are other people who, and like Ajahn Brahm, you know, he doesn't. He just gets on. He does his talks. He just does it, and then doesn't think about it. I don't know, but he does what needs to be done to keep the monastery going.
And he's very relaxed about it, isn't he? Which is so admirable.
And can I say one other thing? Like I went into living in the monastery with this very romantic idea. I'm going to have this cute little hut in the forest, and I'll sit there and sip tea on the edge of a cliff and just watch the wildlife jump past and go in and out of meditation. But especially when you see people who've lived there for a long time, you can see they have got this balance between being community oriented and wanting that time to themselves. And so whichever comes up, they just go with it. And if they get free time, they get free time. It's not because they're there for so long that they're not attached to.
They're more skilled at navigating between the two.
Yeah, that too, definitely. Yeah. I'm just going to turn the fan on 1 second.
Yeah, sure. Go ahead. Certainly looks pretty hot over there with your background. It's pretty hot over here as well, but it's not.
Yeah, really. I wouldn't mind a pina colada or something. Some
That's right.
Coconut, that'd be good.
Oh wow! So, yeah, excuse me. So navigating between monastic life and having to talk to people, certainly challenging. I find myself, getting to a state where anyone knocks on the front door, I get really irritated, which isn't good. And that's something that I have to observe, myself.
But I've definitely changed my opinion about that because now in my work I'm always talking to people, and it's actually there's stillness that comes from a good discussion. It doesn't have to be.
That's true.
2 hours locked in the bathroom by yourself.
Yeah. Well, that's right. Well, that's what I do here. Is I'm 2 or 3, whatever, how many hours locked in this bedroom, and even if a plane flies over the, I get really irritated. So, that's all the air traffic control, but that's totally ridiculous, obviously, and but observing one's mind and its capacity for understanding other people's needs versus then balancing it with your needs. And it's certainly been an interesting journey. I think it would have been something similar for you in the monastery. So did you find yourself having any success personally in that regard, in terms of sort of balancing your needs or frustrations with, I guess, the priorities of the monastery and newbies?
When it came to newbies, it was always a bit funny. But I feel like when I was a lay person living with newbies, then it was tricky because that's when I wanted my time to be a monk and practice. But when I became a monk, then I was more protected. I could follow the monk schedule. I didn't have to worry about, welcoming new guests and things like that. My first upgrade from the introduction shed at the monastery was a caravan like this one. And so that's where I first got my place by myself.
Wow.
That was really helpful too. Just having that space to myself. I didn't have to worry about people coming in and going out. But
that's great. I see. So there's yes, of course. There's maybe you could talk us through that, Dave. There's different tiers of monastic life. You could say, yes.
Mm-hmm.
When you first come in, you go into like a semi-lay sort of life. Is that correct?
Yeah.
It's interesting you mentioned males and females because they're just starting a project called Anukampa. It's a bhikkhuni project. Mm-hmm. So in Buddhist time, there were female monks and male monks, so bhikkhunis and bhikkhus. And they're trying to recreate that sort of equal access, equal opportunity for females and males. And it started out of the Oxford by a bhikkhuni called Bhikkhuni Kanda. And
I'll be right behind that.
Correct. Yeah, he is. Yeah. He is. Yeah. So anyway, we can pick this up again hopefully soon, Dave. Great. I hope you're enjoying this content. This is the Buddhism RAW podcast. It's a not-for-profit podcast set up by myself, and we also have a board of advisors. The board of advisors work on a voluntary basis to make sure that the content that's being produced is accurate and equitable, and make sure that is accessible to most people at whatever level of Buddhism practice they're at, or meditation practice. We work on a not-for-profit basis, like I said, and the board of advisors volunteer their time. So any support you can give us on Patreon once it's set up would be very, very much appreciated. The Patreon page is being set up, like I said. In the meantime, there are other pages you might consider supporting, such as the BSWA, the Buddhism Society of Western Australia, as well as Doug's Dharma. He produces some wonderful content about Buddhism, meditation, as well as the Abhidharma. So I hope you're enjoying the content. Happy listening. Yeah, so we just had a quick commercial break from the podcast. So what you said we were talking about, we finished off last time talking about the monastic lifestyle, and the couple of days between, I've just been reflecting on what you said about, what you were allowed to eat and not eat. You were allowed to eat a lot of
that's right. Yeah.
Things like dark chocolate, I guess protein snacks, and lately I've had to eat a lot of protein because I've injured my right shoulder. Actually, I've injured my right shoulder, so my trapezius has been strained. So I've been eating a lot of protein stuff. But if I could have had sort of protein snacks that tasted good, that'd be great. But like biltong or stuff like that. But I don't eat beef, so that crosses that out. But things like dried fish or salmon is still acceptable. But that got me thinking about sort of the monastic lifestyle. You said you were allowed to snack. You're allowed to have snacks. Is that right?
Yeah, you're allowed an evening snack. Like that's a typical monk thing. It's like you get the big lunch and tea and sweets or something in the evening.
Wow. Okay. Well, that's
But
pretty.
in
So that's
Australia,
still within monastic law. That was still sort of permitted. Was that?
yeah, I mean, it depends which path you look at. If it's Theravada or Mahayana, it's different. I think it's more like a forest module, Thai forest module.
Yeah. Yeah.
But yeah, in Australia, because we'd be doing a lot more work around the monastery in the Australian monastery. That's what I found. So they would have breakfast to keep me going. So,
That's your main meal, breakfast with Theravada as well, isn't it? Yeah.
well, not a main meal, just
They're allowed 2 meals, I think, isn't it? So breakfast and lunch is the main meal, and then
sorry.
I think in Theravada Buddhism they're allowed breakfast and they're allowed lunch as a main meal, and then that's it. Nothing substantial after that.
No, I don't think the breakfast is normal. Breakfast isn't the proper practice.
So it's just one main meal. Okay.
It's just in Australia where they don't need extra muscle. I think they bend the rules.
They bend the rules a bit.
But,
Okay.
but I think even the monks will follow, not having breakfast, but it's more in the monastery, whoever's working
Yeah. Wow.
will be allowed breakfast.
Wow. Well, that's great. That's great. So with all your monastic, how much time were you in the monastery, Dave?
Yeah, so the Buddhist one, pretty much 2 years.
2 years. Wow. And during that time, what would you say was your most, I guess your most your in terms of spiritual achievement or wisdom, what would you say was the single biggest spiritual, I guess, achievement you had, or were there a few? Maybe there were more than one.
There are definitely a few. It wouldn't just be one. But like I was saying before, I just don't have access to all the memories at the moment. If I can have time to think about it, that'd be a lot. But
that's great.
But yeah, I can talk to one of them if we've got time. It's up to you.
Yeah, go ahead. Yeah, far away. Go for it, Dave. Yeah, give us your insights.
I'm not gonna go with the glamorous one. I'm just gonna go with probably the biggest, most impactful, and it comes from my experience with Vipassana. Vipassana in Blackheath.
Yes.
Vipassana retreats, not Vipassana, the Pali word, but Vipassana retreats.
So that's still mindfulness retreats, you mean?
Well, it's a Burmese tradition of silent retreat.
Mm-hmm.
Have you done yourself?
I do a lot of Vipassana practice or mindfulness practice. That's the mainstay of my meditation practice.
Yeah,
it doesn't sound like it's the same thing as what you're talking about.
No, it's using that word, and it does reflect an interpretation of that word, I think. So with Vipassana and the retreats, have you done the retreat, like the 10-day silent retreat?
No, I haven't. I've only done my own Vipassana practice, mindfulness practice, and as I said, I think previously, I was forced into a period of very intense, focused Vipassana practice by myself because of a pretty dramatic health scare.
I guess it is a good idea. It's a good idea to talk about the Vipassana retreats because I think a lot of people will have done those. Maybe you're looking at this. So I've done it a few times. And
Can you give us a summary though of sort of what to expect and what you took away from it and your progress and learnings?
I guess the important thing is to realize that it was for 10 days.
Right.
No talking.
That's a long time. It's a long time.
Yeah. It's I felt like it's a bit of an adjustment coming from the big smoke,
Yeah.
heading into the mountains and then having 10 days.
Sure.
Yeah, not for the faint-hearted, I don't think.
No, sure. Yeah.
And then definitely afterwards, even though very sensitive was not speaking, I still felt like robust simplicity. If I don't know if I word better, like your mind is a bit more simple, but at the same time it's more sensitive.
Sorry, I missed it. A bit more simple, but
Seemingly sensitive.
oh, okay.
Like
Right.
the idea of going back.
You mean more aware? Heightened awareness?
Yeah, but also sensitive, like raw. It's a raw feeling, I would say.
Wow.
Rawness of the mind. And yeah, wasn't looking forward to going back to the big smoke straight away, but most times I usually did. But yeah, so it's a austere, very disciplined, very, like, don't talk, don't look at the opposite sex.
Yeah.
Eat at certain times, eat vegetarian, live very simply, and
Great.
but very scheduled and very like process driven. Like there's a strategy to follow, kind of thing, and
Interesting.
a method that you have to incorporate. Like it is a bit of a authoritarian kind of setup, and
Okay. Disciplined. Yeah.
just do this, or like don't expect to get any results.
And a
Be like,
result. Yeah.
drop everything in your head and just follow this method.
Focus this path. Yeah. Focus on this path. So
So sorry, back to
the
our monastic stay, and
Yeah.
one of the, I would say, biggest impacts was that emphasis on gentleness rather than discipline.
Interesting. Wow.
So you don't need a process, just
Kindness and
practice,
gratitude.
generosity, uh, and wanting others to have a good experience too. They're enjoying others' experience, and so, and if you do that often enough, your mind will become still without any, and that's real stillness. You don't need to control stillness. You don't need to control anything.
Having trouble hearing you there, Dave, but I think I got the gist of it. If I might summarize that, you said the focus became about gentleness and showing gratitude and kindness.
Letting go rather than holding on.
Letting go rather than holding on. And as a result, the more you practice that, that automatically led to stillness. Is that right?
Yeah. I mean, Ajahn Brahm, I think, would say that positive thoughts or good thoughts without any guilt or shame is energizing for the mind. And in order for stillness to happen, the energy has to be directed in the right. Well, I don't even know, but there needs to be a fair bit of energy for real stillness of the mind, and that energy is not for control or anything. It's
Yeah.
when the mind's still, there's no need for control. There's nothing.
No, that's right. Wow. Oh, that's fascinating. So ultimately, so you felt that that was a really positive and fundamental gain in your practice at the monastery, was that ability to, I guess, switch into gratitude and loving kindness, and as a result, stillness came. Is that right? Have I got that right?
It was more that was just the way of living. So, and
I see.
the other thing was the conditions are more important than the practice. You know, creating the right conditions is what will ultimately uh, get the meditation that the
Yes.
Buddha talked about.
Yes.
And
Yes.
no control, no wanting, no schedule.
Wow. Well, that's quite profound. Okay. Well, that's really great. That's a really
And I
powerful.
think we talked about food before, so I was like super surprised because I went there. I think I might have even been on a liquid diet with lots of fasting, and so
Yeah.
which was crazy. But
Wow. Why?
so
Why
I
is it
was,
crazy? Why is it more extreme? You mean?
yeah,
Yeah.
extreme. Better. That's a better word to use.
Wow. Oh, that's cool. That's really
So
interesting.
yeah, there was a lot of me going there thinking, you know, I got to get a vegetarian buffet each day, and I could just drink
Yeah.
fresh juices every day and stuff like that.
Well, that story that Ajahn Brahm related about pork stew being mixed with the other general stew, meat stew, was, I found that quite surprising as well. I thought it would have been a more vegetarian diet as well, but you know, that's where the Buddha said, eat what is given. So you don't, you get to a stage in your meditation where ideally you don't savor any tastes or sensory input, do you? You know, and that includes food and taste being a fundamental and very powerful sensation that we all have. I think that's I found that story really fascinating as well. I was expecting him to be on a strictly vegetarian diet. I don't know why I thought that. I just assumed. You know, when you go to certain other religious institutions, you're strict vegetarian menu, and that's cool too. But yeah, so that's interesting, very interesting. So you said you wanted to talk about or relate to us about your experience with anatta, anicca, and dukkha, and what your learnings were from. Or were they the learnings that you had from the meditation, or just in general, just life as well in general?
Anicca, anatta, dukkha. You can hear me okay?
I can hear you well. Yeah, I can hear. It's just my computer. Its graphics card is about to explode, I think. So I just got to be mindful.
What's that?
The graphics card on my computer is got the fans blowing, so I think it's about to explode. So don't worry.
Okay.
I can hear you fine. I can hear you fine. I just have to lean a bit. Yeah.
Yeah, so when it came to, yeah, I feel like there's a lot that could be said on each of them. I will go with dukkha first.
Okay.
And that was a big one. Just in, I think it was Ajahn Brahm's interpretation of what is dukkha.
Mm.
Yeah, he talked about how, we got the word wrong. It's not suffering. It's life is unsatisfactory. And that word for me, that I felt like that word in itself made a big shift.
Yeah, as in, no, yeah, okay.
Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does. It does. Yeah.
Yeah. Life is unsatisfactory.
Satisfactory. I've been thinking about it lately in terms of what Joseph Goldstein talked about losing one's enchantment and illusion with rebirth and this worldly life. And it sounds like a negative thing, isn't it, to say disillusioned and disenchanted, but actually it's positive to start to lose one's enchantment with rebirth and illusion, the illusion that we have that's created around us. So I totally get what you're saying there. It's interesting. Mm. Yeah. And what about sorry, are you anything else about dukkha, Dave, that you've
well, yeah, that word of changing it to unsatisfactory, it really I would say allowed me to embody the word,
understand it better. Yeah.
It's like, there are people, or even how I understand the story of the Buddha is he did grow up with a very decadent, luxurious, privileged life. So,
it's like Ajahn Brahm says, the biggest losers, the biggest loser of all time is the Buddha, because he chose to give up everything. In fact, in Buddhism and this path of meditation, the more you lose, the better. Ajahn Brahm talks about the fact that he travels with hardly anything, just his robes and his little satchel, which contains hardly anything. I think a banana, whatever, a passport maybe, and that's it. He doesn't need anything else, doesn't want anything else. To lose everything, and his famous book of the art of disappearing, which I think we talked about before, is awesome as well.
Well, there is no one to lose anything, ultimately.
Yeah, exactly. But the point is that to lose everything is the glory in itself. You start to sort of give up everything around you. Whether that's by choice or by not choice. And I guess I might relate to my own experience of anatta, which is non-self here, and then I'll ask you what your thoughts are on that. But my own experience with anatta, non-self, was the fact that in a very quick time frame, I was forced to reconsider, reevaluate everything that I held dear to me, my heart, whether it be material possessions, whether it be relationships, etc. I had to give everything up very, very, very quickly, psychologically, mentally, but also sometimes in reality. And I had no control. I found I had no control over when, how, and what I was giving up. And I found a sort of on deep consideration of that, I found that was in itself, because it was not really to do with me. Nothing I had done this lifetime, or at least I don't think so. I realized that's where the non-self came from. It was the results of past actions in a previous life. So that's the non-self. It wasn't me. It was something, done in many, many lifetimes ago in rebirth, the cycle of rebirth. And I think that's the distinction of Hinduism and Buddhism is if I was strictly reincarnated, look who I am, look at the person I am. Of course I deserve this. But I'm not that kind of person. I'm not the sort of person that would, I guess what one would say was, every time I told everyone what I was going through, all I would get was sadness and crying and tears and this reaction as, how could this happen to you, Asanda? And that's the thing, isn't it? But it isn't. In a way, it is happening to me, but in a way, it isn't. It's not what I had personally done in this lifetime. It's nothing to do with who I am, me, myself, and I now. It's something that I had, that these are dues that I'm paying for, seeded many, many lifetimes ago, potentially. So that was a sort of profound understanding of anatta for me, that not self, and therefore it was sort of a relief to not blame myself for what was happening around me, and that letting go was quite cathartic, I found, and therapeutic. I could forgive myself. Well, I mean, I didn't need to blame myself for anything. It was not well, but I learned from it. Obviously, I realized, okay, well, these actions from the past obviously led to these results, and I must be very, very cautious about what I do in the future. But yeah, that was my, I guess, interpretation and realization of that aspect of those three qualities of, dukkha, anicca, and anatta, three characteristics of, or marks of existence. What do you think about that? What's your personal take on that, Dave?
Oh, I mean, it sounds like a rich, and for you, a bit of like an express experience.
Yes, probably more expressed than I would have liked, but again, that's the whole point. We don't have any choice over it. We don't have any control over it, and that's the whole point of non-self. You don't have any control. We have no control over how things happen in this lifetime. We may think we have, but we don't. We don't even have any control over our own minds, right? And we experience that in meditation sometimes. You want to try and bring to just, but you can't. You can't some days. You just got to get up and go and do some walking meditation or something. We don't even have control over our own minds. And, people with mental illness will only tell you that with more expression, I guess. But that's the thing, isn't it? That's not self. That's the reality. We are heir to, and therefore subject to, and therefore subjected to the results of the seeds we have planted either many, 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 many lifetimes ago, or last lifetime, or even this lifetime. We have no control over when those fruits will bear seed. When those seeds will bear fruit. So that's, it was a very accelerated realization of that, but I'm grateful nevertheless. But back to you. Sorry, I keep bringing it back to that epiphany for me. But what's your experience of anatta, or non-self? What's your understanding of non-self? I still don't think I fully understand it. It's a very vast concept, actually. It's not just
I've got my own flavorings of it now, and I did have before I joined the monastery as well. So I'm not sure it's too Buddhist.
Okay. Honest. Well, now, love to hear nevertheless. Yeah.
You still want to hear?
Yes, absolutely. Because, as I said, I feel like it's a very vast concept, and I've only just scratched the surface. So I'm open to everyone's interpretation. Right? More I can hear about it, the better I feel.
Yeah. Well, I mean, the first thing I will say, it's still only an understanding. It's not.
Yeah.
Not necessarily like an ongoing experience.
Yes.
So that's why when you asked me what did I get out of the staying in the monastery, I didn't go to the glamorous meditation experiences because they come and go. I feel like it's better to focus on something that is more a constant experience rather than fleeting.
Sure. Well, yeah.
Yeah,
Indeed.
with anatta.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't, because I think being in the Thai Buddhist monastery supported this belief because of the simplicity and focus on like the raw Pali text rather than discourses or interpretations.
Right.
Um, yeah, I think it's personal experience almost. And, yeah.
Well, I
So
think that's the distinction with rebirth versus reincarnation, isn't it? If you felt you were reincarnated, then that is a very personal experience, isn't it? Whereas when you're reborn, rebirth by its very definition is that you are who you are now. You're not necessarily you're nothing to do with who you were in a past life. You bring with you that karmic energy, but who you are now and the experiences you go through now are shaped by who you become now, how you're raised, and all of those confluence of karmic energies about how you get raised, the parents you get, that confluence of energies and karmic inheritance is entirely opportunistic and by chance. But you have this reservoir of karmic energy at your time of birth that is sought after and then brought to bear opportunistically at the time of your rebirth. So you wouldn't be necessarily, what I'm trying to get at is it wouldn't necessarily be an experience that anyone can relate to, and a lot of people have struggled to relate to that. It is a concept that brings comfort to people at times of loss, at times of suffering. Certainly brought comfort to me within the concept of anatta, that okay, well, nothing that's happening to me now is about who I am now. I know I've created these seeds of ill will in a past lifetime, and therefore it is bringing.
Sorry, did you say you know that?
Sorry?
Did you say you brought seeds from a past lifetime?
Yeah. As in I've brought with me those karmic energies, if you like, and they're opportunistically bearing fruit now.
But
and it brought me a lot of comfort to know that okay, well, it's nothing to do with who I am now. It's about what I've done in the past.
How do you know that? How do you know that?
Sorry?
How can I ask, like, how do you know that? How do you know that you brought it?
I don't know that, and that's where faith comes in. That's where faith comes in.
That's right. Okay, and hope. Yeah. Okay.
The Buddha talks about having perfect faith in the Buddha, having perfect faith in the Dharma, having perfect faith in the Sangha. But he said, please investigate this for yourself. And I did. I actually to rephrase that answer, it isn't necessarily faith. It has been experience for me. During a time of great suffering recently, I asked the question, why is this happening? And in your states of deep meditation, if you ask a question in certain schools of meditation, they teach that you will receive an answer. And I did. I sought an answer to why is this happening? Why is this happening? Why is this happening? Why is this happening? And at that time, I was kept asking the question and not really realizing that I may or may not get an answer. But bang, in a state of deep samadhi that I was in, I got a flashback of this is why it's happening. This is why, and I got a flash of behaviors that I had done in a previous lifetime that
That's cool.
had led to what was happening to me now, and I realized that I had engaged in factionalism, what Buddha had in Buddhist time they would call factionalism, where I would go and, you know, gossip or say things about some people, and that would cause splitting of relationships, loss of people would lose their belongings, wealth, and so on and so forth. And I dare say a lot of my lifetime I have lost a lot of things. I had worked very hard to gain and attain, and then, you know, lost relationships to, through no fault of my current self, if you like, and you know, and that was why I had gotten into that deep state of thought about, you know, okay, why is this happening? Why? How? Why? And like I said, it happened unexpectedly, and as a result of that insight that was provided to me, insight that I sought, I should say, it led to a very granular, or I would even say cellular level change in my behavior to prevent those sorts of actions from occurring, and therefore entering into the laws of causality, and therefore you know bearing fruit, the karmic effects, if you like. So that led to that really granular cellular change in my behavior. I sort of counted on an interesting document called the 10 Unwholesome Deeds, or in Pali or Sanskrit for Dasa Akusala, 10 meaning Dasa and Akusala meaning unwholesome deeds. In Theravada, it was a document that was written by Dr. Ari Ubayasekara, and subsequently has been distributed far and wide. And that those 10 deeds can be pretty interesting, and some of the things that are in that document are quite subtle. And you know, growing up in the way that I was brought up in Western civilization, some of the things in there you wouldn't think much of, but you know, let me tell you, the results can be quite profound. So I guess that's what boosted my faith in the teachings. It boosted my faith in investigation, and boosted my resolve, my persistence to continue the practice. Yeah. So there you go. I've shared a story with you that are even on this podcast now that I haven't shared with many people, in fact. So there you go. A very personal experience.
Yeah, wow. So yeah, that faith thing, that's a interesting topic for sure. Faith.
Yeah. So it's funny because faith is something that I feel like I had entertained well before that experience. Faith is something that I had entertained is the right word, engaged with. And that's why I continued to meditate and keep asking those questions. And I feel like if I hadn't had the faith, I may not have engaged in the meditation. I may not have engaged in that particular type of meditation, and therefore not sought the answers and not received the answers as a result. So, you know, it's like a chicken and egg story, isn't it? What comes first? And I guess in this case, if I hadn't had the faith, I would have never sought the answers, never persisted with my practice, and therefore never really gotten the answers that I wanted, or not got. I certainly didn't get the answers I wanted. They were quite shocking answers, but not got any results from the practice because I wouldn't have engaged in it. I feel that's what I think. So, chicken and egg story. I feel like faith is something that is certainly very important in Buddhist practice, and that's certainly something that I promote a lot of because of my personal experience, and I'm really glad you asked me about that.
Yeah, wow. The word, yeah. It's it sounds like, yeah, faith is a huge part of your practice. And do you think that comes from your upbringing?
No, I don't. Oh, well, no, not really. Because early in my life, or yeah, in my late teens, I became very investigative of religion and other religions. But yes, I was born into a Buddhist family. I was born into a family where my grandfather, Dr. R.P. Wijaratna, who you'll find on Wikipedia, was one of the instrumental people that translated components or large components of the Abhidhamma to English.
Oh, wow.
Joint
That's
author.
cool.
And he's quoted in Wikipedia as being one of the people instrumental in that process. But you know, he passed away when I was 11, so I feel like I knew the man. I felt his presence. I understood who he was, but I didn't really get to know him. You know, and my dad really didn't have time for religion because he was a doctor in the UK and was, you know, across multiple jobs because of his migrant background and being a migrant doctor, but very successful, but he just didn't have time because he was successful. So I never really engaged with Buddhism until much later on in life. I looked into other religions, Christianity, Catholicism, Islam, et cetera, but you know, Hinduism indeed, quite heavily, but Buddhism, I guess, yes, I was born into the family, but it wasn't forced upon me. Why did I land up in Buddhism? Because I found that a lot of the discourses that I found on Buddhism were not deprecating of other religions. So even the YouTube talk by Bhikkhu Ananda Jyoti about the various different realms of existence, he himself talks about the fact that Buddhism is the only religion that, or only sort of discourse that talks about the fact that there are other religions in the world and acknowledges them, and says that even in these different realms of existence, heaven realms and the hell realms, there are people or beings that are of different religious beliefs. And I found that really profound. And I guess that's what made me think, okay, well, there you go. That's all the you know, validation I need. So let's just pursue this path. And so here we are now.
Yeah, wow. But you did grow up in Sri Lanka or UK?
A mix of the UK and Sri Lanka. I did kindy and year one in Sri Lanka, but I was my parents emigrated to the UK when I was about 12 or 18 months old, and then they tried to come back when I was in kindy and year one to try and forge a life back in Sri Lanka because things are just so difficult for Dad in the UK with the climate of racism that was there in the late 70s and 80s. They tried to do something, and then, as you know, in the early 80s, the war broke out in Sri Lanka with the riots, and then life became untenable in Sri Lanka all over again, which seems to be quite cyclical in Sri Lanka, unfortunately, whether it's war or economic troubles. A lot of people are ending up quite displaced as a result. And certainly I felt very displaced in the UK for most of my childhood, facing a lot of racism. I still remember very early on in my scholastic career at the Monks Orchard Primary School. Got a name drop there, but there was a blonde kid, very, very stocky, you know, really, you could see his muscles rippling at a very young age. Must have been 8 or 9 years old. And he was the only one that came to my defense. Little blonde Michael. He was just stocky as all hell. And he would come to my defense if he saw that I was getting any abuse. He said, "You got to go through me before you talk to him. Stop it. Stop doing that." And he was just such a hero. He was my biggest hero of my childhood because I faced monumental racism, and he came to my rescue every time. And I've tried to look him up on social media just to say thanks, and I can't find him. So if he's watching this podcast, Michael, mate, you saved me in a big way.
Wow. That was in the UK.
In the UK.
Whereabouts in the UK?
South London, I think.
South London. That makes me think of David Bowie, another Buddhist celebrity.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, he's got some good albums.
Oh, yes, he does.
Include some of the some Buddhist culture. Yeah, he's cool.
Yeah.
Was cool. Vale.
Absolutely.
Bowie is a legend.
He's a legend. Absolutely. Yeah.
What is it? Buddhist in Suburbia or something like that?
Yeah, that's right.
Buddha of Suburbia with his accent. I did a cover of one of his songs. That was.
Did you?
Yeah,
you're quite a talented musician, aren't you, Dave?
that's taken a bit far.
There's your modesty. There's your modesty.
I did enjoy chanting. I was always especially in the Hare Krishnas when I was there, I was like the chronic chanter. Really? Yeah.
Well, what language is that they're using in Hare Krishna to chant?
Sanskrit.
It is Sanskrit. Oh, that's interesting, isn't it?
Yeah.
Why did you enjoy the chanting so much? Was it the rhythm?
Well, I think that was. Yes, good question. I think we've touched on the pineal gland and the activation of the pineal gland. That was the big driver. Yep. And
that's interesting, isn't it? Because they say that a lot of the ancient religions like Buddhism and Hinduism are in Pali and Sanskrit because it invokes a very primal rhythm in our bodies.
Yeah.
They're such ancient languages that we don't even know their origins sometimes, and so they have a universal energy apparently when they're chanted in certain rhythms. So I mean, the Bojjhanga Sutta, for example, there's a famous BBC. It's mentioned in BBC documentary. The Bojjhanga Pirita, if it's chanted in a certain angle with different people around a person that's sick, the energies and the rhythms that come off that Bojjhanga sutta and the way it's recited have been shown to actually heal a person, which I find absolutely incredible. So I'm not surprised you say you enjoy chanting.
Yeah. It was. Yeah, I would. In Hare Krishna, every day we were required to do at least 2 hours of Japanama, but like with your voice, not just internally repeating it.
Wow.
And the 2 hours, I believe it was like 16 rounds or 18 rounds. I think the number is important, but and each round could take like it could take a long time, but if you did it continuously, each round would probably take 5 or 10 minutes. So
amazing.
Yeah, it was. Yeah, and I would be the one that'd be going up to like 30 or 32. I'd just be walking around with my chanting bag all the time.
Wow.
That was what I did for fun.
That's fantastic. It's fantastic.
But yeah, there'd always be this, because I was hanging out with guys in their 20s, it was very, in like a devotional way, competitive. So
Ooh, that's interesting.
they'd always, yeah, there's some funny stories there. But, yeah, I feel like I'm accessing this unconscious filing cabinet, which I don't think about. But
Me
yeah,
too. It's been a great session once again. So these videos and these podcasts are purely informational for people interested in Buddhist practice and meditation. And Dave, you've elucidated your personal experience with Buddhism, meditation, and religion, and I've accessed some of that in my very early memories of childhood. So look, I'm very grateful for your time as always, and we look forward to doing this again. Like I think it'd be great to get one or two of our guests on next time. We'll try and tee that up. I mentioned to you I want to get the founder of Arogya Pty Ltd, Dr. Lanka Wijawardena, to talk about the Eightfold Path and getting that into our daily lives. And I think you mentioned you wanted to get one of your contacts as well, who used to be also be an ex-monk. Yeah. Well, let's do it. Let's do it. Now that we've done our mutual introductions and our backgrounds, I think we can start to progress this podcast into other directions.
Yeah, that'd be fun. And I was just thinking, as we were talking about chanting, it would be nice to start and finish with a song. If we do it again, that'd be we could pick.
That'd be cool.
Maybe one of the ones in English.
Yes.
At the start, and then
the one that I've been doing a lot of lately is the one that acknowledges the Buddha as being the awakened one. Itipiso Gatha or Sutta, which is great. It talks about him being awakened. He's the awakened one, the knower of worlds, a tamer of tameable men, gods and men, teacher of gods and men. He is the awakened one, and so on. It finishes. But I found that immensely comforting to recite on a regular basis for some reason. I think again it comes down to vibrations and whatnot. Yeah, but yeah, I think you're right. It would be great to recite that or something like that, or a song, as you say. It'd be lovely. Yeah, let's do it.
So it's so funny how my mind works, I think.
It's amazing. I love it. It's great. Yeah, wonderful. Okay, thanks for your time, Dave. Have a great weekend, and let's chat again soon.
Yeah, love your thoughts, huh? Love your thoughts.
Likewise. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
Thanks, Mike. Dave, sorry. Got Mike on my mind now. Okay, take care. Bye-bye.